Hello everyone and happy Halloween! So today I will be talking about the Amityville horror. So I will be talking about the real events that took place there and then discussing how I felt about the book by Jay Anson. And this is marketed as a true story. So let's get started. This all took place in Long Island in the town of Amityville. And on November 13th, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo killed his entire family. He killed his father, Ronald DeFeo Sr., who was 44, his mother, Louise DeFeo, 42, his two little sisters, Dawn, 18, and Allison, 13, and he killed his two little brothers, Mark, 12, and John Matthew, 9. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was always a troubled boy. He was violent against others, and by 17 he was kicked out of school and he became an LSD and heroin user. But his family still wanted to give him a shot, so they gave him a job at the family car dealership. However, in 1974, Ronald robbed the dealership of $20,000. He pretended that someone else came, but the police and his father suspected it was Ronald Jr. And when his father accused him of the robbery, Ronald Jr. became very aggressive. And he threatened to kill his father, and he followed through on this threat. On November 13th, he got a .34 caliber rifle, and he went into his parents' room while they were sleeping and shot them, and he did the same to his brothers and sisters. And this all took about 15 minutes. And after he did this, he just went about his normal routine. He took a shower and got ready for work. And on his way to work, he took his bloody clothes and the murder weapon and dumped it in a storm drain. And at work, he acted dumb and didn't understand where his dad was. So he kept calling his home, trying to reach his dad. At noon, he left work, which isn't unusual, and he went to a local bar to meet his friends. He kept the charade going by calling home and just questioning where his father was. And at 6 p.m., he told his friends that he's going to go home to check on his family. However, at 6:30, he comes storming into the bar and screaming, "You gotta help me, I think my mother and father have been shot." And so the people at the bar go with Ronald to his house, and they found his parents and brothers and sisters shot, and one of his friends called the police. Ronald told the police that he thought the mob was involved because they had issues before with the mob, and so they put DeFeo into police custody to protect him. However, once they started to investigate, they realized that Ronald's story had a lot of holes in it. They found an empty gun box, and once they found out time of death, they realized that Ronald would have been home at that time. And so when the police came to talk to Ronald, he confessed right away and said, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop, and it all happened so fast." His trial began on October 14th, 1975, and his defense lawyer, William Weber, attempted an insanity plea. He claimed that DeFeo heard voices that told him to kill his family, but the prosecutors had a psychiatrist that proved otherwise. And on November 3rd, 1975, the jurors came back and found him guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. They did not believe the defense lawyer's case about him hearing voices, and they sentenced him to 6 consecutive life sentences. And currently, he is in Green Haven Correctional Facility in New York. 13 months after the murders took place and DeFeo was convicted, the Lutz's family moved in on December 18th, 1975. The Lutz family consisted of George Lutz, 28, Kathy Lutz, 30, and her 3 children from a previous marriage. Daniel, 9, Christopher, 7, and Melissa, 5. And due to the murders, this beautiful house, which was 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, was sold for only $80,000. The time they moved in, the Lutzes knew all about the murders. The realtor told them about it, but they were not superstitious, and they were just newly married and wanted to start a new life together, and they thought this house would be perfect for that. As soon as they moved in, supernatural things started to occur. So a friend of theirs, after hearing about what happened at the house, insisted that they get the house blessed, and so they did. Father Mancuso agreed and came over to bless the house, and he claimed that when he was walking through the house while Kathy and George were unpacking, he was going through the house spraying holy water and saying prayers. When he entered this one room, he was doing his thing and he heard a voice saying, "Get out." Finished up, and he left without telling the Lutz about this. However, he did call later and told them that they should stay out of this room upstairs, and that is where he heard the voice. And that was the former room of Mark and John DeFeo. And Kathy had plans to make that room her sewing room. Within days of moving in, their personalities drastically changed. George got more agitated easily, and their kids just didn't listen as much. And they even claimed that they hit the children, and also their health started to decline. So I will be going through some of the supernatural events that they claimed occurred. George was always plagued by this feeling cold, and so he was obsessed with keeping the fire going, so he was just always standing by the fire, feeding it more and more wood. And George said that he would wake up every morning at like 3:15 a.m., and he found out that that is when the murders of the DeFeos took place. They claimed that there was always strange odors around, and that green ooze came out of the walls and keyholes. The house, especially the sewing room that the father told him to stay out of, was always plagued by flies, even in the winter. And Kathy would claim that she would always feel this presence behind her. George said he discovered this small room in the basement behind a bunch of shelving units. It was painted red, and so he called it the Red Room. And he was confused by this room because it wasn't in the blueprints. And their dog, Harry, would not go near this room and kind of cowered as if he was sensing something evil. The Lutz's 5-year-old daughter developed this imaginary friend called Jody, and at first they thought it was fine because it's normal for kids to have imaginary friends, but it was soon discovered that it was this demonic pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. So that's not really normal though. And on one occasion, George said he was outside with his son, and he looked up at the window and he saw this demonic pig-like creature staring down at them. At times he would go outside and he would see hoof-like prints in the snow. Their crucifix would always end up upside down and would be emanating a sour smell from it. And on numerous occasions, the Lutzes tried to contact the father many times, but it was always disconnected. And so they kept calling and calling, but finally they gave up and decided to take matters into their own hands. And they said they armed themselves with crucifix and went around the entire house saying the Lord's Prayer. And they said a chorus of voices erupted throughout the house saying, "Will you stop?" And on January 14th, 1976, the family reached their breaking point. Till this day, they won't go into too much details about what happened that night since it terrified them. But they did say that loud noises, like banging, as if like a marching band was in the house, erupted at night, and their furniture moved around, and George swears that his wife Kathy was levitating off the bed, and they terrorized the kids. So 28 days after moving into the house, they fled. They left all their belongings and took shelter at Kathy's mother's house. 20 days after the Lutz family vacated, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren became involved. The Lutz refused to join them. They would not return into the house, but they did give them their story. And during their investigation, Ed was physically pushed to the floor while saying some prayers in the basement. Lorraine was overwhelmed by the presence of demonic forces, and she was plagued by visions of the DeFeo family laid out on the floor with white sheets over them. The Warrens claimed that this land used to be owned by the Indians and that they used that land to house the sick and the mad, and they were left there to die. And the Warrens believed that all this suffering that was done on this land left the property with a negative energy. And with this negative history, it was a magnet for demonic forces. And in their investigation in this house, they captured a picture that appears to be a little boy on the second floor. And some think that this is the spirit of one of the DeFeo children. And they believed that this house greatly impacted the DeFeos and the Lutzes. And on their way out, they retrieved some of the Lutzes' possessions and they got the deed to the house. The Lutzes were able to sell the house and they moved to California. That is what the Lutzes claimed that happened at this house in Amityville. There are some controversies that went along with this book. The Lutzes claimed that a lot of damage happened in the house, like locks were broken, doors, furniture, but once the house was sold, it was sold to the Cromartie family for $55,000 in March 1977. And this family claimed that nothing seemed broken and nothing was replaced, that the things that they said were broken, it didn't look repaired or anything. And the red room was exaggerated. Patty Camarado, who was a former friend of the DeFeos, said that this room wasn't a secret at all. It was just a storage room downstairs, and that the DeFeos used to store some of their toys in that room. And in the book, they said that in January they found cloven hoof prints in the snow. And researchers went back and saw that there was no snow at that time. And people debunked the picture that the Warrens took. They say that it's probably one of the many people that were in that house investigating. And in May 1977, George and Kathy Lutz filed a lawsuit against William Weber, Ronnie DeFeo's defense attorney, Paul Hoffman, who was a writer, Bernard Burton and Frederick Mars, who are clairvoyants who examined the house, and a bunch of magazine publishers who covered stories on this house. On the lawsuit, the Lutzes claimed that it was an invasion of privacy and caused mental distress, and the lawsuit was for $4.5 million in damages. Hoffman, Weber, and Burton immediately filed a counter lawsuit for $2 million for fraud. The lawsuits against the News Corporation was immediately thrown out for lack of evidence. And the rest of the lawsuit went up against a judge, and the judge dismissed the Lutz's claim and said that based on what he's heard, he believes that the book is a work of fiction. And on September 17th, 1979, in an issue of People magazine, William Weber claimed that it was all a lie and claims that he knows this book is a hoax. We created this horror story over a glass of wine. And he is referring to that he and George Lutz and Kathy Lutz came together for a meeting and just created this story. So with all this controversy, a lot of people think that the Lutzes made this up. And the writer of the Amityville Horror never met the Lutz family. the Lutz family recorded their story and submitted a 45-hour recollection of what happened and sent it to Jay Anderson. And so Jay Anderson bought the rights to the Lutz's story. Overall, I liked this book. It was fast-paced, so it was a really quick and easy read. I liked how it is written. It isn't set up by chapters, it is set up by dates. We get the full count of like what happened to them on certain days up until the 28 days until they left. So I like how he set that up. And I do believe that Jay believed the Lutz's family, and I think he did a really good job of telling their story and portraying how terrifying their stay must have been. I do think that it could be a little disrespectful to the DeFeos. He does cover it a little bit in this book. He didn't change the names or anything, and they gave the address to the house, which many people went to go see. Since then, the address has been changed and painted, so it doesn't look the same. I know that he wanted this to be a true story, but I think, like in many books, they change the names of people just to protect people's identities. And I think that he should have done that in the book, considering that a family did get murdered in this house. I don't understand all the hype for this book. It is good, but it isn't very original. And I say that not knowing if I believe it or not. I'm saying that what happened to them was very textbook haunting. And so I don't understand why many movies were made off of this story, when I'm sure there are a bunch of other stories they could have been pulled from. I really don't know if I believe the Lutz family, because there are a bunch of evidence to say that they were lying, like the lawyer admitting that they made it up. But I really don't understand their motives, because the Lutz family really didn't make a lot of money off of this. They sold their rights to Jay Anderson, so they got a little bit money from the book and the movies, but they didn't receive a lot, and they lived in poverty for the rest of their time, and they left all their belongings in that house and sold it for less than what they bought it for. So they had a lot of debt. So unless they counted on that $4.5 million lawsuit to come through, and their con just didn't work. But who knows, Daniel, one of the children who lived through this, till this day claims that it happened to him. But people have lived in this house since then and have not experienced anything supernatural. But if what happened to the Lutzes actually did occur, that is a horrible thing to happen to them, because what they went through was unimaginable. They were newlyweds and wanted a fresh start and thought they were going to have a great life together, and they just went through 28 days of hell. So let me know in the comments below if you believe that this is a true story. So like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!